I hope others will trickle in. Excellent. Well, lovely. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to Beyond the Headlines, the truth about studying in Canada. It is a pleasure to be here with my four panelists today who've taken their time to help dispel some myths and lay down some truths about what is a concern or not for students and parents who are considering Canada as a study destination. Today, so myself, I am Audrey Duhame. I am one of our directors of partnership based in North America and supporting our North American university partners, specifically these four lovely and esteemed institutions who've decided to spend their time with us this morning. So with that, I would love to pass to my first panelist, Queen's University, represented by Diana. Would you mind introducing yourself for us?
Thanks, Audrey. Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Chow. I'm the Regional Manager for International Enrollment in Asia for Queen's University, and I'm currently on campus.
Shannon, do you think you could pick up?
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Bracken. I'm the Director of Admissions and Recruitment at Ontario Tech University, just in the Greater Toronto area, and pleased to be chatting with you today.
Anushree?
Hi everyone, welcome to today's session. My name is Anushree Sanjay Patil. I'm the recruitment manager for York University, based in Toronto right now. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And Robert.
Good day, everyone. My name is Robert Perrier. I'm the Interim Vice Provost of International at Lakehead University, which is located in beautiful Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, as well as our second campus in Orillia, just north of the city of Toronto. Pleasure to be here today.
So thank you all. I will reinforce that we have a lovely variety of institutions here speaking, a mix of privates and publics, a mix of locations as far as in the city and a little further outside the city, whether you're looking for outdoor activities or a really metropolitan type of experience, whether you're looking for research or straight into jobs and industry. There are a lot of perspectives on the call here today, and so I do encourage you to put your questions into the chat for our panelists. With that said, we are going to do a bit of Q&A here at the first 20 minutes. We've got some questions that we've already sussed out, but as we continue to talk, feel free to put your further questions into that Q&A section. I've got members of the team who might be able to answer you via text. Otherwise, we'll pass some of those questions live towards the end. And anything else, if it's a burning question and you really want to get it answered, we'll be able to follow up with you via your registrations. Just get in contact. So with all of that said, we understand that it has been a challenging and different time for Canada-India relations with changes in immigration policies and some headlines and things that have not been helpful or great to see, as highlighted as they are. And I think that there's a lot of truth that we can suss out between what's actually going on here, and that's what we're getting to do today. I see a question in the chat. Yes, we will be sending out a recording of this session afterwards as well. So just to keep that clear. So let's go ahead and kick right into this. The main difference that, our Canadian institutions and folks applying to them are having to deal with are PALs, these provincial attestation letters. This has changed the process a little bit. Shannon, do you think you could speak to us about how PALs are, implemented and how this is creating a hurdle or not creating a hurdle for students wanting to join Ontario Tech?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to speak kind of in general, I think, about maybe how it was implemented across Canada. And so the provincial attestation letters, the PALs, as we affectionately refer to them, were distributed by our federal government to our provincial governments. And then it was up to the provincial governments to allocate those to all of the institutions within their jurisdictions. I think what we found this year is that at least in Ontario, which is where all four of our public universities are, I think for the most part, the allocations were largely awarded based on your previous year's enrollment. So at the Ontario universities, there weren't really any cuts to how many we could award based on previous years. The PAL allocation is not, though, the number of students you can enroll. It is a letter that students provide with their offer letter when they're applying for their study permit, their visa to Canada. And so by us issuing that PAL, we are essentially working with that student and saying, you can now go and apply for that visa that you require. And so typically with the PALs, most universities are requiring a student to confirm their admission to the university in some way, whether that's through a form or a deposit being paid. And then they would go and apply for their study visa. And then at that point, it's up to immigration on awarding that visa. We can't issue another visa, I'm sorry, another PAL if a student, let's say, did not get their visa. There's no kind of replacing that student. But for the most part, the allocations that we received were roughly in the, I think the numbers that we were expecting based on previous year's enrollment. So we didn't really take any cuts. And I'd also sort of reiterate that there was not a shortage of PALs available in 2024 for undergraduate students. In Ontario, there were still available PALs, I think, at most universities. So I really want to stress that the PAL is not this very competitive document that you sort of have to fight to get, or that we are allocating. I haven't heard, and I'm not going to make a blanket statement on this, but I haven't heard of any situations where a university was not allocating PALs to students by a certain citizenship or by program. I think a lot of the early concerns around PALs and sort of just wondering how it was going to work, I think have sort of been alleviated for a lot of us over the last few months, in that there is an ample amount of PALs available at the current status right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I saw Diana and Robert both nodding along with that. Would you like to add your 2 cents on how that's impacted you at your university?
I can go first. I just want to echo what Shannon said. For us, there was no shortage of PALs as well. And I would say that the process was actually pretty smooth on how we rolled it out and how we supported the students as well. So it's never been a concern for us, and hopefully it'll stay that way too.
Always lovely to hear.
I mean, Audrey, I'll just add that, right now, when it comes to attending a Canadian public university, it's business as usual. Yes, there is this additional step that requires you to receive a PAL as part of that, but all of our institutions have incorporated that into our overall admissions process. It's seamless, it's not difficult, and we're happy to work with you and get that PAL issued for you and make sure you can successfully place an application for a study permit. A lot of these changes within Canada have really been an affirmation of the value of a Canadian public university degree. And the university degree is really recognized as an entry point for career-based employment in Canada, ensuring that those who are seeking professional jobs and meaningful employment are really being focused towards that university study, whether it's undergraduate or master's or PhD level studies. And so the PAL allocations really emphasize that in terms of how they were allotted, and ensuring that Canada's public universities could continue to welcome the students into our very enriching learning environments, which lead to some of the strongest career outcomes upon graduation in Canada.
Excellent. Well, that is a fabulous segue to one of the next topics I wanted to go to, which is, so these changes that have been implemented, what are the potential benefits? Is there an advantage to how they're going to impact the student experience? Is it going to mean more employment opportunities? Is it going to mean more, alignment with the labor market, both in Canada or back home? Can any of you guys speak to, what could potentially come out of this in a really good way for students who are interested in that Canadian experience?
I'm happy to jump in on that if Audrey, if that would be helpful. I mean, I think right now when you look at Canada, we're experiencing significantly low unemployment numbers, and so the prospect of employment in Canada remains extremely high. And what we're seeing is, and the federal government of Canada has acknowledged this, that university graduates with degrees from a public university are achieving their dreams of meaningful career-based employment upon graduation. That is why the postgraduate work permit remains intact, exactly as it has been all along. The pathway to employment remains absolutely, there. I mean, even where I come from in Thunder Bay, we have recent unemployment rates are only about 3%, which is below even the national average. So Canada does have a bit of an aging population at this moment when it comes to the baby boom generation. And they're like my parents are retiring now, right? And there's this massive amount of individuals who are exiting the labor workforce, and that is opening up incredible opportunities. And so again, that journey to meaningful employment and potentially even staying in Canada for a longer duration afterwards absolutely remains there. And I think a lot of these changes have ensured that international students are focusing their efforts towards pursuing the education that they need to gain those types of jobs and experiences. And so that really is why some of those changes, I think, are in place to ensure that when students invest in their future and come to a country like Canada, they are pursuing an education background that is best aligning them to achieve success when they graduate, whatever their next steps may be in their journey.
That's excellent to hear. And again, you had kind of begun to allude to that before with how well you guys have been able to roll through with your PALs. Do any of my other university panelists want to speak on the potential upstream effects of these more sort of streamlined or labor market aligned systems of granting PALs?
If I can add a little bit. So I think particularly when it comes to universities, we have not been, the policies have not restricted our students as much as perhaps they have with some of the college programs. So in Canada, there's a difference between the college and the university. And the college is a great system and it is a public system, but they offer different credentials. And so universities, we have not been restricted in terms of our students' access to the post-grad work permit. And so all programs, bachelor's, master's, PhD, students can still obtain that 3-year post-grad work permit. We're not being restricted in sort of what programs students can study in a university. And so there are some nuances there. But I think at the end of the day, if you're talking about the labor market, Canada has been very clear in saying that universities are your access to the labor market. And these are the students that Canada and our federal government and our Ministry of Immigration have made it very clear that those are the students that they want to stay long term. These are the students that they want to potentially immigrate to Canada as a permanent resident and potentially a Canadian citizen down the road. Because of the high value and the high quality of that educational experience that they know they're getting across the country.
If I could just add to what Shannon said, so both universities and colleges play a vital role in providing education to international students, and they've been having a really great number of applications across the different countries. However, universities are in a better position in respects of the diverse programs that we offer as compared to maybe colleges. We have a more stronger research focus, and they're established, universities have a more established global reputation. Therefore, it's a simpler pathway for students to apply for the postgraduate work permit and seek better opportunities after they graduate as compared to maybe colleges. That does not mean that colleges are lower or anywhere far distinguished from the universities.
Yeah, so if I can summarize, again, we've dipped into, one of the other topics we wanted to hit, which is how these changes are impacting universities and colleges a little bit differently. And so just to begin to reiterate for our audience, our universities here have have not been affected by the caps on their PALs. They're not seeing that. And they are supported with that post-study work permit through many of their degrees. Some of the limitations reflecting that permit are restricted to colleges only. So universities are not being hindered by some of those same immigration changes regarding post-study work permits. And then to reiterate Anushri's point, there is a greater diversity of programs at the university level, as well as a greater sort of quality and rigor to that accreditation, to our understanding, that is empowering those universities university students to be looked at for long-term residency in Canada in some more accessible ways. They have a smoother path towards that, I would say. Is that pretty reflective of what you said, Shannon? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. The recent changes around some of the program pieces that I think might be sort of causing some panic or just some confusion, I think, among students, is something around what are called CIP codes, CIP, and forgive me, I don't recall what that stands for, but it's CIP and we call them CIP codes. They are being restricted at the college level. So students at the colleges can only get a postgrad work permit if they attend certain CIP code programs, and those are tied directly to what the government has identified as labor market needs from the colleges. The universities are not being restricted, and so all of our programs are open to international students and accessible into the labor market. And I think that goes to Anushri's point on the diversity of our program mix and the value to the research enterprise in Canada and the employment sector. And so that CIP code is not something that's being limited to universities. And I just want to reiterate that's not something that we need to put in our offer letters or that students need to be looking at when they are looking to make their sort of application decisions to our universities.
I really appreciate that further clarification. I am going to go back to sort of a basic question, a basic burning question related to this, which is, are you noticing overall any changes in the volumes of students obtaining visas, especially out of India and South Asia right now? Could you speak to, again, that the actual downstream impact you might be seeing of some of these changes for our audience? Everybody's jumping at this one, I can see.
mean, I can
Oh, go
certainly
ahead.
share
Go ahead.
Lakehead, in our experience right now, students are still achieving their visa success rates at typical rates that we're expecting. Even the federal government, I mean, in the limited amount of data we hear and what we're seeing is that the actual visa success rate has not completely changed at all. Over the last couple of years, Canada's visa system has been really improving its processes and really trying to streamline its efforts with focusing around a single style of visa application that is efficient and can be, those applications can be processed essentially anywhere in the world. So there have been some modern improvements to that process system. So typically right now, we don't see we haven't experienced any weird anomaly in terms of visa success rates. Typically, students who have the sufficient academic background, the means financially, are having success in their visa applications at this point. So I think that, and again, this allocation of PALs, like we'll see Canada will have a decline, but that's because we have certain control mechanisms in place, right, through the PAL. The PAL numbers that were allocated were based on the principle that visa processing and success rates would essentially remain the same. That is how allocations occurred. So again, we do believe that fundamentally we'll still continue to see a similar success rate over recent years. That's at least been our experience with our candidates that have been coming forward.
And I think that's really reassuring again that you're seeing, everything on par here as we really begin to settle into these changes now 18 months down the line. And, some of the more recent ones, but adapting accordingly. Anybody else want to speak to that question on visas specifically out of South Asia, India?
I was just going to add, yeah, we didn't really see anything anomalous this year in terms of a decline. And I think one of the positive outcomes of having the PAL process for students is immigration knows exactly how many study permit applications they're going to get every year because they've said this is how many applications we are going to take via visa PAL process. So they can actually plan accordingly, as opposed to in previous years where if there was an extra 100,000 study permit applications, well, that's when it leads to declines and processing delays because immigration just they were overwhelmed with that volume and they can now actually plan their resourcing. And Robert mentioned, they've been improving their technology and their sort of processes. And so sometimes applications can be deferred to other low volume markets just to speed up that processing. So the more straightforward applications might just be shifted to another officer in another part of the world or someone in Canada who can, again, kind of keep that processing up. So I think that's something that going into 2025 that we're really hopeful for is that the processing times might actually improve.
That's awesome. That's lovely. I will take just, oh, no, go ahead, Diana, please.
I also wanted to echo both Robert and Shannon's feedback. For Queen's University, we also didn't see any changes in the volume of visas or study permits being issued. In fact, for us, according to statistics, last year our visa approval rate was at a 95%, which is probably one of the highest in Canada, as we've been notified as well. But in reaction to all the announcements and to ease the confusion, provide better service for our students, this year, earlier on, we also partnered with a third-party company called Border Pass. Shannon might be familiar with that as well. So for Border Pass, it is a third-party company, but they have a team of professional lawyers to help serve students, review their documentation and to ensure a better pass rate, approval rate for the study permits as well. The cost of the service is covered by the university itself. It is optional to our students, but if they do want to access this professional service, they can do so, and we're there to support them throughout the whole entire journey as well. So just an example of how we are better supporting our students in light of these announcements, so that they can get to campus if they wish to start their studies in Canada and to make the experience better.
Incredible. That's an amazing initiative. I'm so pleased to hear that is moving forward for you guys. And that does so lead to one of the other topics that we wanted to get into, which is how are you implementing changes that are supporting your students during this time? And specifically, your Indian student communities on campus as well. So I don't know if you've got more than that, Diana, because that sounds like a really cool initiative, but happy to hear anything else that might be going on from any of our universities to support these international students.
Adding on to that, on top of Border Pass, we have expanded what we call the Queen's Commitment. So that is our commitment to help serve our international students. And this includes any student, regardless of their citizenship, that studied outside of Canada. For us, we really want their process from applying to coming to campus as smooth as possible. So one of the issues with the concerns would be the study permit. So we did implement Border Pass. Last year, we also implemented a tuition credit to help them alleviate some stress as well as fund their education. And we've also kind of revamped and added towards our scholarship and awards program for international students. So for example, for non-Canadian students, we have implemented 4-year renewable scholarships. And so that adds up to a maximum of $100,000 Canadian. So for example, if you're an arts science computing student, that's almost 50% off of your tuition for the year. For these scholarships and awards, we also don't want to add additional paperwork, so students don't have to apply for it. It's automatic. And then to renew it, we also take the stress away because we're not asking students to maintain A's or high scores throughout the whole entire school year. They just have to be in good standing to renew this funding for the next year. Good standing means passing your classes. On top of that, we have implemented other programming, for example, free airport pickup from Toronto Pearson Airport to Kingston, where we're located. And then also expanding our international ambassador program. So these are current students who are studying different programs at Queen's University, and they're more than happy to meet with potential students throughout the summer or even earlier to sort of answer questions that students or parents might have from a student perspective and telling them what it is like to study in Kingston and at Queen's University. So those are some examples that we've recently implemented or improved in light of what's been happening this year.
Excellent. Well, it's lovely to see Queen's initiatives at the forefront of doing so much to help our international students feel secure, feel like they have access to support services as they're getting accommodated. Again, scholarshiping and discount, that is just a lovely, lovely initiative to have out there. So thank you, Queen's University, for setting a great example for the ways we can support our students. Anybody else want to speak to how their university is supporting international students in this day and age?
I can go next. So similar to Queen's, we've also started a new scholarship program for our students applying from not necessarily India, but overall international students. These are these are renewable scholarships as well. automatic based on your merit. You just need to confirm your place, put in your deposit, and you can apply. You can receive the scholarship. It's renewable in the sense that we need you to obviously pass your examinations and maintain attend classes so that you can have these scholarship for the rest of the year as well. It comes up to a total of $37,000 for the 4 years that you're going to be studying with us, which is a good amount for students. Additionally, we know that there is a lot of students who are facing issues with securing housing, especially for institutions that are based in the GTA. York is based in the GTA, so we know we want to support students that way. We've recently announced our 4-year residence guarantee. So we have 10 accommodations at our Kiel campus, one of our biggest campus based in the GTA. So students who are applying for their first year at York and as an international student, they will be guaranteed accommodation if they apply for it before the 1st of May. So they just need to let us know and we will be able to secure this for them. We also have like York International that supports international students for applying for their visas, how to prepare for their documentations and how to make sure that they have a good enough paperwork in place to receive their visas. They also organize these coffee chats to make students feel at home once they are here and to kind of settle them down and make sure that they are doing well in their classes and adjusting to a different climate, to a different culture, and feeling well, kind of at home, at least initially. Similarly, we also have a lot of societies available for students to take part in. We have like a Hindu association, we have a Gujarati club, a Sikh association, Sikh Women's Association as well. So, and that's not to say that any group that feels not represented can't go ahead and form their own club. You just need a minimum number of maybe 5 or 6 people to form a club, and then you can have your own association as well. And that goes to say that we have around 4 million people who are Indians who are based in the GTA. So it's a really good number of students that feel at home when they come here.
If I can just
Amazing.
add, Audrey, and I think Ontario Tech offers most of the things that have been talked about here as well. But something that the province of Ontario did when they allocated the PALs this year is each institution, in order to receive their PALs, actually had to sign an agreement with the province. So our president signed these agreements where we basically had to commit to a number of things for international students. So you have to either guarantee residence on campus or provide staffing support to assist students in finding off-campus housing. You have to provide mental health services to students. You have to provide like career pieces. So this is across Ontario for all of our institutions. These are mandatory. And if we don't provide these services, which to be fair, most of us were already providing anyways, I think this just sort of formalized it. We can't receive international students. Like the province will say, like, you're not meeting this commitment to students. You're not creating a successful environment for students to ease into Canada and sort of that transition period as being a university student in a new country. So I just really wanted to highlight that that's something that's existing across the sector, and it's being enforced. And I wouldn't have any concerns that any school is not meeting those sort of standards that have been set.
Yeah,
That's really great
I can just
contextualizing.
build
Go
on
ahead.
Chad's comments. I think it's really important to realize, Canada's public universities have always been known for the robust wraparound services that they offer. And this is part of the appeal of why Canada, really rose to be the #1 destination in the world for students pursuing higher education. Not only were they going to receive a Canadian university credential that is essentially accepted anywhere in the world. It is a recognized credential from a quality standpoint and assurance globally. But the fact is that the progressive nature of Canada's public university campuses is completely around delivering on the student experience with the wraparound supports, ensuring everything is there. And again, that goes everywhere from supports from pre-arrival. We have at Lakehead, we have 5 international student advisors that all have RISIA or RCIC certification, right? They are licensed immigration officers to support students at any point of their journey through the process of arriving, while being a student, and postgraduate support as well, right? So there, those kinds of things, that's, you know, Canada has always had sort of a commitment to that type of culture, that students require and need support throughout that process. And so that's, again, that's that idea that, you know, having the confidence in pursuing a public university education in Canada, students should still feel very, very good about that, and those supports will be there to meet them at their point of need. And so yeah, I think that that was part of what built that confidence piece, and I think that that absolutely still remains. And if anything, we see, as everyone has articulated with their various services so far, we only continue to add and improve those services with each year that comes. And I think that what's really, I think, wonderful too for Canada is we don't assume that we have all the answers as institutions. We actually work with our students to figure out what their needs are, and then we develop supports around that as well. Students are at the center of what we do, and we ensure that that we are meeting their needs in the ways that best will support them. And so our services are adaptive. They change based on what the needs are, and I think that, you know, when we go through these moments of change right now, which the country is absolutely experiencing, what you're seeing is in every instance, Canada's universities, public universities, are stepping up to the plate, are meeting those needs, and ensuring that students continue to have a successful transition and experience when they are studying here in Canada.
Excellent. That is, again, incredible context to hear, and you know, to reiterate, I know much of this is work that you have all been doing, but at the same time, it is also really cool to hear about the innovations that the universities are continuing to add on to really enhance that international student experience. With that in mind, would you talk about, so Anushri touched on it just a little bit. Um, we are here with our South Asian, our Indian audience, and we do want to understand what student life has been like for your Indian students on campus in all of the ruckus. Has anything changed for them? Have you gotten any feedback on additional support they're requesting or they need? What has that experience been like for the students who are already there?
I'd love to jump in on this one because I've been thinking about it since you opened our session today, Audrey, and you kind of hinted at this idea that Canada and India maybe are experiencing a moment in time. And I just want to contextualize this a little bit, because the reality is Canada and India, we're like a family. And if we all think about our family and our family dynamics, right? We are so integrated across both our cultural perspectives, the history of Indians and South Asian folks coming to Canada is longstanding, and the mosaic that is Canada includes, you know, wonderful contributions from, you know, the South Asian community across our country, and then the ties across trade and all different sectors is so robust between Canada and India. But like any family, there will be moments where perhaps some of the family members, you know, we have a little tussle, right? We don't agree on something. Perhaps we have a little moment, right? But what we know is those moments are small compared to the bigger family that we hold, right? And so while we navigate this moment in time, I don't think it's at all indicative of the actual relationship that Canada has with India. And certainly Indian students that come and study at Lakehead in our communities, we have such a robust community that's here. Students are welcome. They're so well supported. Even when we look at, you know, what's happened in our particular community, like Thunder Bay, where like we look at the restaurant scene and the number of students that have brought all different cuisines and flavors and new, you know, we even have like specialized South Asian restaurants versus those from the North, and, you know, the opportunities that are there. So this, again, I think it's a moment in time. It's a small family spat. We'll have our tense moment, but like all families, we work it out in the end, because what's more important is that family relationship that we have with each other. And I think that that's where we're at. So if we can think back, and I encourage everyone to think about their own families and their own family dynamics, they may have their moments, but truly that bond is deep. And we all know that we'll work through this, and we're stronger for it at the end of the day.
Well, I think it's hard to follow that, Robert. I think you said that particularly well. But if anybody else would like to jump on, again, you know, respective to their student community, and changes that they might or might not see.
I can jump in here. When there are a lot of negative media starting between these two countries, I also reached out to some of my students as well as parents to check in on how they're doing and to understand their sentiments. Queen's University is located in Kingston, which is a university town, I would say. So there's our institution, but there's also St. Lawrence College as well as the Royal Military College. Kingston is quite a safe environment to study and live in. I can say that as a resident as well as previous student as well. And community is a very important word for us. And we ensure the health and safety of everybody that lives in this area and studies here as well. We also are very open to welcoming new individuals as well as sharing cultures, just like what Robert said. And I think that's similar sentiment across cities across Canada and definitely in Ontario as well. Like what Robert said as well, the food scene is a good example. For Kingston, we have seen a larger number of Indian restaurants as well as grocery stores opening up. It's not just to feed the needs of the students, but because there's also needs and interest from other individuals that are trying to learn more about this culture and really get to know everybody and create this very familiar and very friendly environment where we can all live and share and learn from each other too. For Queens, we do have a number of student associations related to India in particular, for example. There are some cultural clubs like the Indian graduate students at Queen's University. There's dance clubs as well. And we see students, Canadian students, join those clubs too because they're open to learning more. And I really like to see the dynamic, how the students are sharing their experience. At Queen's, our students are very involved too. So student clubs is definitely one of the ways to learn more about the culture. We also have the International Center here that has evenings where we do culture sharing, food, movies, music, etc. And then we also have ambassadors who are students from a certain region or have studied at a certain region or who would like to. And so there's a lot of opportunity to share culture and to really learn from one another. And I would say the Indian culture is one of the more popular ones nowadays because there's more students coming to Canada and students hoping to stay and share their experiences as well.
Amazing. Always lovely to hear about sort of the community building that happens both on and off campus as you again bring more cultures in and facilitate both local Canadian people, or sorry, students and generalized community members in engaging with cultures from abroad.
I was just going to
I
add,
haven't visited.
a
Go
small
ahead.
little anecdote. One
Yeah.
of the signs I knew that we were seeing full community integration was when the movie theater, so the local Cineplex theater here in Thunder Bay, now has at any given moment 2 to 3 Bollywood films that are playing, like in Hindi, the full experience, and that's a sign, right? Because even local companies initially going, hey, we have a critical mass of students. They're looking for the non-traditional Hollywood film experience. They want to come, and that of course has opened up so many opportunities for exposure to both, folks being able to see what the latest cinema is coming out of India, but also at the same time for Canadians to experience that as well. And that's, I always look for little signs, and I thought that was a profound sign when all of a sudden, the screens are now showing films that are not the traditional sort of Hollywood, but rather welcoming Bollywood to our community.
That is amazing. What an awesome anecdote. I can't say I've even seen that in universities here locally for me that are growing in their population. So that's incredible. Shannon or Anushree, did you want to add on this topic of your Indian student communities or just sort of engaging how that's impacted your students on campus or not at all?
Yeah, I think we're in the Greater Toronto area. Toronto is the most multicultural city in the world. And so I think our students, they fit into part of the community because more like in Toronto, more than 50% of people who live in Toronto were born outside of Canada. And that's not just international students, that's just people who've immigrated from a number of different places. And so there is sort of that diversity where they're sort of coming into a community that is, it's built on this sort of mix of cultures. And then I think, Robert was talking about the Canada and India and some of the geopolitical stuff. And that's, there's always diplomatic stuff that's going on. Every country has diplomatic relations with every other country. And I think we have to remember that, our students are coming in, they're 18, 19, 20-year-olds. they're coming into university, they're meeting friends, they're hanging out at the, the shopping center or at their friend's house, or they're going to like a student event on campus. And sure, there is this geopolitical, it's everywhere right now. But they're just living their lives on campus. And I think that we have to remember that, when students they're students, and, they're not sitting there every day saying, well, what are our prime ministers talking about today, right? They're just going and having food with their friends.
Yeah. Very, very important point.
Not much to add because all of my colleagues have already said the great things that are happening right now in Canada to support Indian students. Just like Shannon mentioned, we too are based in the GTA, so majority of our population is born outside of Canada. They are mostly immigrants who've come and settled down over here. We do, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a great South Asian community, and around 4 million of them are Indians. In order to support the students who come to York University, we do have a number of clubs and associations, ranging from an Hindu association. We also have Tamils who are represented over here. We have a Gujarati association. We have Sikhs and stuff like that. Any community that does not feel representative, like I mentioned, you can always form your own club or society, with a small fraction of students who are like-minded, who are interested in forming this club or society with you.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I really appreciate all of your guys' respective feedback on, again, your current students and, again, just them living university life and getting on regardless. I am going to go to the chat to a little bit of our Q&As. We have a couple of little key items we want to clear up around PALS, and then we will look for, I am going to just pause here and address our audience. We are moving into the latter sort of third towards the end of our session here today. So I'm going to go to the questions in the chat and we'll do a wrap up. So this is your last opportunity to put some additional questions in the Q&A for us, and we'll try to get those addressed. So can anybody speak on briefly? So actually, I'm going to pass this to Robert because I think you mentioned something earlier. Actually, apologies. Shannon, you mentioned this earlier, that some of the benefits of the PALS is that the visa officers can plan for a certain amount of numbers of study permits that are going to be issued. So somebody mentioned that, do we have enough embassy officers in the Canadian consulate in India for these visa approvals? Could you speak to that for just a second?
I probably am not the most knowledgeable on this, and I don't know if any of us are. I couldn't tell you how many staff are in each visa office. I know that Canada has condensed some of their operations in India over the last year, and part of that is the geopolitical relationship. But I think they've also just close some of the kind of local offices throughout the country. And I think they're streamlining some of that through Delhi and then through some of the other offices as well, just with some of their sort of technology improvements and how I mentioned they're sort of distributing to low volume offices. But personally, I couldn't actually tell you how many visa offices there are anywhere in the world.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. And then perhaps I might have been conflating something because I think Robert had mentioned earlier that there is some ability for them to push cases between the offices to help support that caseload. So maybe that helps clarify whether there are enough embassies officers in the Canadian consulate. It sounds like the Canadian Immigration has come up with a plan for being able to address those volumes. You want to speak on that for just a quick sec, Robert?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I mean, essentially, a visa officer is not just because they might be located in a particular region doesn't mean that they're exclusively processing applications for that reason. The whole intention of the modernization project was for, visas essentially could be sent anywhere in the world where there was caseload availability. So, for example, I was recently in Nepal a few weeks ago. We're hearing of processing potentially happening both in Singapore as well as in Bangkok. I know that for India and Nepal, we also see now a lot of visa processing coming out of Abu Dhabi. So, definitely like Canada is leveraging its network of visa officers to make a more efficient system to make sure that they can process things as quickly as possible. So I would not be concerned about that. And I think that like Shannon alluded to earlier on, knowing the numbers, they can then properly resource to make sure that we can process in an efficient time frame.
Excellent, excellent. And Is it possible for a PAL to expire before getting a decision on a visa application or on that study permit application?
The study permit just has to be submitted to immigration before the expiry date on the PAL. So currently all the 2024 PALs expire on January 21st, 2025. So as long as their study permit application is in by then, it doesn't matter if the PAL then expires before they receive a decision. We're currently, just to get ahead of the next question, we're currently awaiting our 2025 allocations, and we're hoping to get those I'm assuming in early January, and then we'll sort of roll out that process early to mid-January. I would think we'd hear more from the government, and then we would be reaching out to all of our admitted students about that new process to get those PALs.
Excellent, thank you. This question seems like it's part of the process of PALs, but so universities issue PALs alongside the offer letter, generally speaking, and there's no other way to get a PAL, right?
I would say that each institution likely has its own process, and they will articulate how they are processing PALs to the applicant. So, always the general rule of thumb is continue to follow your email account, watch for updates, and then each institution's process, because each institution essentially was allowed to develop their own internal processes for evaluation and issuing of PALs. I would just encourage each applicant to be in touch with the respective institution they're seeking to study at, who will be able to articulate that process.
Excellent, excellent. I'd like to ask you about, so firstly, somebody is saying that they're hearing that post-study work permit applications are getting rejected for Indian students a little bit more. Are you seeing that as any kind of trend for the students that you're working with applying for such?
I personally haven't heard anything.
Our end either, and we've been working with students, especially throughout the fall, who are recent graduates, and also ensuring they're getting their English test done so they can apply for their PGWPs. Like, things are moving along. I have not heard of anything at the university level with rejections of PGWPs.
Okay. Well, that is great to hear from you guys to counter what might be heard in market. A sort of related question, somebody wanted to ask specifically about what our universities are doing to help students gain employment, from their degree or while they're studying on campus. Can any of you speak to those initiatives at your university?
I can start us off. Similar, I think, among most universities in Canada, we do have different student services to help students. For example, we have different career offices that are open to students who are interested in learning on how to find employment, how to prepare for interviews, as well as looking for career opportunities or job opportunities to sort of gain that work experience to make them more employable in the future as well. For different universities, there are different internship or co-op opportunities as well, so that students can opt in to get some work experience before they graduate. For Queen's, we do have a one-year internship program, for example. The students go after a third year, but you can ask other universities how they set it up and what the advantages are, and you can also ask us about examples of where our students have interned or found employment as well. Beyond that, we do have international student advisors, just like what Robert said. They are certified advisors who can advise on study permit issues or, for example, working in Canada, etc. And so for the logistic and admin part, we also have staff to support our students. So everything is free. We don't force students to use it, but we do want students to be aware that the service is there if they do want to seek it.
Great. Absolutely great.
I think the support that we offer to international students is going to be standard across all 4 institutions, where we do have co-op options available for most of our programs. It's not a compulsory co-op. You can take it if you want to. There are students who are not interested. They just want to finish their degree and just go back to their home country and start working there. There might be students who are interested in getting that international experience of 1 year of internship, and we do have those options available. For York specifically, we ask students to take this module, which helps them prepare for the co-op. So it's like a career module that they take in their first year. Successful students who complete that particular module can then go on to have their co-op opportunities opened up for them. We tend to encourage students to take the co-op option because it makes them more employable, gives them more opportunities, makes them understand what it's like to work in a different country, in a different environment. Then we also have like student advisors, similar to what Robert mentioned, who support students in understanding how to apply for their PGWP after or closer to their graduation. We'll make sure that we host career fairs on campus so that students have the opportunity to meet with different companies that come here for recruitment purposes. And we generally, as an undergraduate student, we encourage them to go for each of these events, because the more you go, the more opportunities you understand, the more roles you are exposed to, and then you know what exactly you want to do, rather than attending one career fair at the end of your program and expecting something great to happen out of it. I myself was an international student, and I would not be able to emphasize enough how important it is to go for these career fairs, because that's the networking that you require in order to secure a job.
If I can add, Audrey, it's in our best interest for our graduates to be employed. We are not in the business of bringing in students who cannot find jobs down the line. And I think, that's why we have a lot of those really robust services, because we don't want it getting out that our students can't find jobs. I might be slightly different. I'm a tech-focused university. And so, we don't offer programs that aren't market driven. That's really in the ethos of our culture. But I think in general in Canada, our services are there to ensure that every opportunity is going to be available for the student and that they're adequately prepared to go out into the Canadian or international workforce. And for international students, there's also usually enhanced services to be able to help them adapt to working in the Canadian environment where they might not be familiar of some of those nuances, right? A CV is different than a resume. We use resumes, right? You don't put a photo on a resume in Canada, for example. So we can help students with some of those kind of cultural nuances. But for international students, one of the things that I think they're often nervous about is that they don't necessarily have that network in Canada, right? A Canadian student, might have a parent that knows someone at a company, where an international student might be deficient in that area. And that is where those careers offices and our co-op offices are there to make those connections. They're the ones that are bringing employers to our campuses and setting up interviews for students. So it's really valuable for students from India to go and use those services, because that's going to be their foot into the door of their career down the line.
Excellent.
The one thing I want to just add to this discussion today, Audrey, the fact that, employment, of course, graduate employment, post-grad employment is a really important outcome. That's the return on the investment. But a lot of students are also hoping that they might be able to work while they're studying at the time, to make a little supplementary income to help offset their costs. So the Canadian government, of course, recently expanded the opportunity that students can work up to 24 hours per week while they're studying full-time in school. That's either on or off campus. And in fact, in the summer break, if you're doing like a typical undergraduate program, you can actually work up to full-time during the time that you're not in class, so during your normal study break period. So that opportunity to work while studying is very strong. And depending on where you are in the country, the employment opportunities are quite rich for even students that are just studying. So in Thunder Bay, every single international student who wants to work is working. There's ample job opportunities. It's not competitive compared to sometimes the major centers where you have a lot of different folks vying for the same types of positions. We don't see that. And so our students are finding meaningful work that is helping to supplement their resources while they're studying as well. So in addition to the post-graduation piece, but also that time while they're engaged in their studies.
Excellent. And that, so again, clearly the alignment between universities and their incentive to make sure their students have employment is right there for every moment of the student's studies, whether it's finding that supplementary experience while they're studying in something part-time, whether it's co-ops and internships and getting that experience leading to a career and making industry connections, or just using the Career Center and all the resources you guys are offering there. So that's excellent to hear. And, related stated, the network that you have, the location that you have reflects the jobs. It also reflects, again, sort of safety and security, which was, I think, the last main question from the chat that we're going to address. So to those in the chat who have some specific questions about visas, we'll try to follow up with you directly on that. I think that that information can be found on a visa processing, or sorry, study permit processing. I do want to focus back here on last thoughts here about safety and security, and then we'll move on to some perhaps tips or guidance that you might want to pass on to our audience as they're going through their application process this year. So first, safety and security. We're all in Ontario, but in different parts. Can you speak to safety around your campus and how you support students?
I can start off. So at York, we have a dedicated group for community security and safety. They are available for students 24/7, 365 days. The kind of services that they offer are mostly focused on campus. So if a student had an early morning class or a late evening class and was feeling unsafe to go from their faculty building back to their residences, they can just call the helpline and somebody will be there to assist you, guide you from your accommodation to your faculty or the other way around. They also have like on-call security services. So if you're locked out of your room or if you see something that is suspicious, just give them a call and they are there within a few minutes to support you. So we do want to make sure that students feel safe and secure when they come to campus, especially for 18-year-old students who leave their home and have really nothing to base their safety on. We want to make sure that they have a lot of support available at the university.
I'd add, we also have a campus walk program similar to that if you want to walk home back to your car or residence at the end of the night. And there's security stationed in every building 24 hours a day, essentially. But when things like residence, so if you're living on an on-campus residence is typically a secure facility. And so, for example, our residences, they're staffed with someone at the front door 24 or the front reception 24 hours a day. You have to scan a key card to get into the building and into your room. And you have to sign in every guest. So you can't just bring a friend in without the front desk being aware. So they have that log. And so there are kind of those protection measures, particularly in the residences where students are like the community living areas, which I think is something to really highlight. And those aren't new measures. That was when I was a student, those things existed. And so I think that's just reinforces sort of the value that we place on student safety. There's things like poles, we call them blue light poles. They're in every parking lot. So if you feel like you need to call security, it's a straight line into security. So like you pick up the phone and security is immediately answering. So those things exist across our campuses, just as a precaution more than anything, not because there's a history of incidents. It's just there for, I think, people to just feel safe and secure.
For Queen's University, like I mentioned before, we are located in Kingston. It's a university town, and we are very proud of the community that we've built here. And as a community, we're also like a family. So we do look out and take care of one another. So it's rather safe here as well. Queen's University also works really closely with the city police, so the Kingston Police, throughout the whole entire school year, the whole entire year, and especially during bigger events. For example, if we're expecting more visitors to come to Kingston for a convocation, then the Kingston Police will have additional staffing on hand just in case they need any support or even to like direct traffic. So it's a really safe place to study here.
And I would echo that all of the similar things are there. Canada is very safe. It's one of the safest countries in the world, truly. And certainly our campuses are communities unto themselves, right? And so we pride ourselves in providing safe and secure living as well as study environments. And that's something that students can look forward to absolutely when they are in Canada.
Excellent. Well, we are headed into the top of our hour here. So I'm going to ask you for your final thoughts here. What should our audience take away? If they're clearly here because they've got some interest in Canada, they're supporting students and families. So what's the main thing you'd like to send them away with as they proceed through the application process or the consideration process in the year ahead?
I think I can start just with a quick sentiment. I think the overarching thing is the student experience has not changed. Our universities are still the welcoming, really robust communities that they've always been for international students. And come and talk to us as the source. Sometimes the media can make a spectacle out of one or two very minor things, or sorry, minor like stories. And we as a whole, Canada is still very much open for international students. We still very much love having our students from South Asia come and be a part of our communities, and that hasn't changed.
I'm gonna call Diana because you look eager to speak.
Um, I think I can say that our universities in Canada are very committed to supporting our students, especially when new policies come out and things could be quite confusing. We're here to support you and to navigate and understand these policies with you. A lot of our universities as well, including all of us on this call, have colleagues or team members who are also based in market. So that allows for faster responses to any inquiries. So you don't have to wait for a response if we're sleeping in your wake because of the time difference. But we also have staff and team members who are culturally aware and understand more about what families and parents are concerned about. So the level of customer service and the way we support our families is definitely top notch compared to certain other countries too. And I'm very proud of that.
Very nice.
I think for me, at the end of the day, when I think about the news stories that are out there, how things get conflated by media, the reality is Canada has only said they're reducing their international student numbers by 10%. That means over 90% of the same number of students are welcome to come. And in fact, as we've articulated, I think throughout all of this, Canada's public universities continue to have full access to our programs for international students. Students can expect to have the same kind of robust and quality education experience, and they can also expect that they will be able to find affordable options that will allow them to stay within Canada and pursue their postgraduate work desires and dreams, right? And I think that that's super critical. My takeaway is Canada is open. It's business as usual for Canada's public universities, and the opportunities that folks have come to know absolutely still await them in the country. And so students should feel confident, not nervous, confident to apply to Canada's public universities and know that the programs are there, the expected outcomes are there in terms of employment, and of course the culture and welcoming atmosphere and safe atmosphere is also still here for them, and we look forward to supporting them on their journeys.
Brilliant, brilliant. Anushree?
Nothing different to add. Just would like to say to students that in order to make sure that you have an efficient and smooth process to joining us for whichever intake that you're coming here, hopefully fall, we would just encourage you to make sure that you accept your offer letters and apply for visas on time to make sure that everything goes smoothly and that you arrive here in time.
Excellent. Well, thank you to all of my panelists so much for your time this morning and your well thought out answers to what is, a complicated situation in some ways, but also business as usual, as we find out when we get together and have real open dialogues about this. With that in mind, I want to thank my audience for joining us here today. Diana was kind enough to refer to our in-country representatives that every single one of the universities have, and they will be joining a panel at the same time next week, bringing together some students and parents from the universities that you see here to have a further conversation about what that actual experience is like. So if you're really looking for some further answers, please feel free to join us next week. Otherwise, thank you so much for everybody's time today. Your engagement will follow up with the recording and any questions that you still have. Thank you and have a lovely rest of your day. Goodbye, everybody.